Zendaya, at the peak of her career, had escaped to the Blue Ridge Mountains to get away from everything. Only her trusted housekeeper Marie was with her, but deep in the mountains, someone else was watching them. And that person was after something far more valuable than Zendaya's millions of dollars. The black Mercedes-Benz G-Class SUV wound its way up the narrow mountain road, its engine purring like a satisfied cat. Behind the tinted windows sat Hollywood's youngest billionaire, Zendaya Coleman, her usually perfect makeup-free face showing the exhaustion of someone who'd been running from paparazzi for weeks. "Miss Z, you sure about staying up here alone?" Marie Washington asked from the driver's seat, her weathered hands gripping the steering wheel with the confidence of someone who'd been driving wealthy families around for 2 decades. At 55, Marie had seen it all from teenage meltdowns to public scandals, but she'd never seen Zendaya this rattled. "We won't be alone, Marie. You'll be here." Zendaya's voice carried a vulnerability that never made it into her interviews. "Besides, nobody knows about this place except us." The mansion that came into view was breathtaking, even by billionaire standards. Perched on a cliff overlooking the Blue Ridge Valley, the $50 million retreat was a masterpiece of modern architecture blended with rustic mountain charm. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered panoramic views of endless forest, while the structure itself seemed to grow organically from the mountainside. Marie had been with the Coleman family since Zendaya was 12 years old. She'd watched the awkward preteen transform into a global superstar, then into a business mogul worth over $2 billion. Through every red carpet event, every business deal, every heartbreak, Marie had been there. Not just as hired help, but as the closest thing to family Zendaya had left. "Remember when you first bought this place?" Marie smiled, pulling into the circular driveway. "You said it was your fortress of solitude, like Superman." "Yeah. Well, Superman never had to deal with social media trolls and divorce lawyers." Zendaya's laugh was hollow. Her recent split from her co-star husband had turned ugly, with accusations flying in both directions. The media circus had become unbearable. The mansion's interior was a study in understated luxury. Custom Italian furniture, original artwork, worth more than most people's houses, and technology so advanced, it seemed almost alien. But despite the opulence, there was something comforting about the space. Marie had helped design it, insisting on a kitchen that actually functioned and bedrooms that felt like home rather than hotel suites. "I'll start dinner," Marie said, setting down their bags. "You go relax on the terrace. Look at those mountains and remember why you fell in love with this place." Zendaya nodded, grateful as always for Marie's ability to read her moods. As the older woman disappeared into the kitchen, Zendaya stepped onto the wraparound terrace. The view was spectacular. Rolling mountains stretched to the horizon, painted in the deep greens and golds of late autumn. The nearest neighbor was 15 miles away. No paparazzi could reach her here. No process servers or entertainment lawyers. Just peace. The first day passed quietly. Zendaya slept until noon for the first time in years, then spent hours on the terrace reading scripts and sipping the chamomile tea Marie insisted would calm her nerves. They had dinner by candlelight on the terrace, talking about everything except Hollywood. Marie shared stories from her childhood in rural Virginia, while Zendaya reminisced about the days before fame complicated everything. "You know what I love about you, Marie," Zendaya said as they cleared the dishes. "You're the only person in my life who knew me before I became a brand. Child, you're still the same girl who used to sneak cookies from my kitchen. Success didn't change your heart." That night, Zendaya fell asleep to the sound of wind through the trees and the distant call of an owl. For the first time in months, she didn't dream about courtrooms or cameras. The second day started perfectly. Zendaya woke, refreshed, and actually hungry, a rarity during the stressful divorce proceedings. Marie had prepared her favorite breakfast, steel-cut oats with fresh berries and local honey, plus coffee so good it could have been served at the finest Manhattan cafe. "The delivery service dropped off groceries this morning," Marie reported. "Fresh everything, just like you requested. Though I still think we should have brought security." "Marie, that's the whole point. No security, no assistants, no handlers. Just us." Zendaya stretched luxuriously. I want to remember what normal feels like. They spent the morning exploring the property. The mansion sat on 200 acres of pristine wilderness, with hiking trails that Zendaya had commissioned but rarely used. Marie, despite her protests about city legs, kept pace easily, pointing out wildlife and identifying birdsongs with the knowledge of someone who'd grown up in the country. Your grandmother would have loved this place, Marie said as they paused. At a scenic overlook, she always said city money should buy country peace. By afternoon, they'd settled into an easy rhythm. Zendaya worked on her laptop responding to emails, reviewing contracts, making decisions about her production company while Marie tackled the household tasks she insisted on handling personally. The housekeeper had always been protective of her employers, but with Zendaya, it went deeper. The girl had lost her parents young, and Marie had filled gaps that money couldn't fix. As the sun began to set, they prepared dinner together. It was something they'd done countless times over the years, but it felt different here, more intimate, more real. Marie seasoned the steaks while Zendaya chopped vegetables, both women comfortable in the silence that comes with true friendship. I've been thinking, Zendaya said as they cooked. Maybe I should take a break from acting. Focus on the production company. Stay behind the camera for a while. Marie paused in her seasoning. Running away won't solve anything, child. I'm not running away. I'm being strategic. Marie's tone suggested she wasn't buying it. Your daddy didn't raise you to quit when things got hard. It was nearly 10 p.m. when they heard the first sound. A sharp crack, like a large branch breaking, somewhere in the woods beyond the terrace. Both women looked up from their wine glasses. Probably just a deer, Marie said, but her voice had lost its casual tone. Yeah, Zendaya agreed, though she was already reaching for her phone to check the security app. The mansion had motion sensors and cameras throughout the property, but the nearest one showed nothing but empty forest. They finished their wine in companionable silence, but both were listening now. The mountains had their own sounds: wind, animals, settling timber, but something felt different, more deliberate. Marie whispered, pointing toward the tree line. Did you see that? Zendaya followed her gaze. For just a moment, she thought she saw movement, not the random shifting of wind-blown branches, but something more purposeful, something that might have been a figure moving between the trees. Motion lights aren't coming on, Zendaya observed, checking her phone again. If something was there, they'd trigger. Unless someone knows where they are, Marie replied quietly. The thought sent a chill down Zendaya's spine. The property's security layout wasn't public information. Only a handful of people knew the camera positions and sensor locations. Her attorney, the security company, the construction crew who'd installed everything 3 years ago. Let's go inside, Marie suggested. Early bedtime tonight. Zendaya nodded. But as they gathered their wine glasses and prepared to head indoors, another sound stopped them. Cold, heavy breathing. Not the quick pants of a running animal, but the slow, deliberate respirations of something or someone trying to stay quiet while watching them. The breathing seemed to come from directly below the terrace, where the mountainside dropped away into darkness. Both women froze, barely daring to breathe themselves. Then, as suddenly as it had started, the sound stopped. Inside. Now, Marie commanded, her voice carrying the authority of someone who'd protected others for decades. They retreated into the mansion, Marie immediately activating the full security system while Zendaya checked every camera feed on her tablet. Nothing. The screen showed empty forest, peaceful meadows, and the winding driveway leading down the mountain. Whatever had been out there was either gone or very good at staying hidden. Maybe we should call someone, Zendaya suggested, though she wasn't sure who. The nearest police station was 40 minutes away. And what would she tell them? That she and her housekeeper thought they heard breathing? Let's wait until morning, Marie said. Could have been anything. Bear, maybe. They're active this time of year, getting ready for winter. But neither woman slept well that night. Every sound in the mansion made many as it settled in the cooling mountain air brought them both to full alertness. Zendaya found herself checking the security feeds obsessively, while Marie made several rounds of the house, testing locks and peering through windows. Around 3 a.m., Zendaya finally drifted off. Her last conscious thought was relief that they'd see daylight in a few hours, and everything would seem less ominous in the morning sun. She was wrong. Marie was already in the kitchen when Zendaya stumbled downstairs at 8 a.m., looking like she'd barely slept. The older woman was standing at the window, coffee mug in hand, staring intently at something outside. "Morning, Miss Z. Come look at this." Zendaya joined her at the window, following her gaze to the ground below the terrace where they'd sat the night before. Even from inside, the marks in the soft earth were clearly visible. "Footprints," Marie said simply. They weren't animal tracks. The impressions were clearly human, large, bare feet that had pressed deep enough into the damp soil to leave detailed imprints. Someone had been standing directly below their terrace while they'd had dinner, close enough to hear every word they'd spoken. "How long do you think they were there?" Zendaya asked, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. "Long enough to leave a dozen prints. They moved around down there, like they were trying to get a better view." Zendaya pulled up the security app on her phone, scrolling through the night's recordings. The cameras showed nothing unusual, but that only made the situation more unsettling. Someone had managed to get close enough to leave footprints without triggering a single motion sensor. "We should call the police," she said. "And tell them what? That someone walked on your property? Child, you know how this works. By the time they get up here, interview us, and write a report, whoever this was will be long gone." Marie was right, but that didn't make Zendaya feel any better. In Los Angeles, she had layers of security bodyguards, surveillance, safe rooms. Here, they were truly alone. "Maybe we should leave," she suggested. "Maybe we should," Marie agreed. "But first, let me check something." The older woman disappeared into the utility room and returned with a powerful flashlight. "I want to walk the perimeter, see if there are more prints. I'm coming with you, Miss Z. You should stay inside where it's safe." Marie, not letting you go out there alone. They spent the next hour circling the mansion, and what they found was worse than a few footprints. Someone had been systematically surveying the property. Prints led from the woods to every window on the ground floor. Disturbed ground near the generator shed suggested someone had been examining their power supply. Most disturbing of all, they found a small camp in the woods, trampled grass, cigarette butts, and food wrappers, indicating someone had been watching the house for at least several days. "This isn't random," Marie observed, picking up a cigarette butt with the tissue. "Whoever this is, they've been planning something." Zendaya felt sick. The safe haven she'd built in the mountains had been violated by someone who'd been studying their routines, learning their vulnerabilities. The question was, what did they want? "Pack our things," she decided. "We're leaving now." But as they headed back toward the house, they heard an engine. A vehicle was coming up the mountain road, the first they'd seen since arriving. Both women froze, watching as a battered pickup truck appeared around the curve. The truck was old, rusted, and loud. It pulled into their circular driveway and stopped, engine coughing before falling silent. The man who got out looked like he'd been living rough, long hair, thick beard, clothes that had seen better days. But his eyes were alert and intelligent. "Morning, ladies," he called out, maintaining a respectful distance. "I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to check if everything was all right up here." "Who are you?" Marie demanded, stepping slightly in front of Zendaya. "Name's Jim Tucker. I live about 5 miles down the mountain. Been seeing some unusual activity in the woods lately." His accent was local, Mountain, Virginia. "Figured I should check on the folks in the big house." Zendaya studied him carefully. He seemed genuine, but after finding evidence of a stalker, she wasn't taking any chances. "What kind of unusual activity?" she asked. "Someone's been camping in the woods, moving around at night. I run trail cameras for hunting season, and they've been picking up movement." He gestured toward the forest. "Found some concerning things, too. Looks like whoever it is has been watching this place." The relief Zendaya felt was overwhelming. They weren't imagining things, and they weren't alone in noticing the problem. "Have you called the police?" Marie asked. "I did, but they said unless someone was actually trespassing or committing a crime, there wasn't much they could do. Public land, you know." He paused, looking uncomfortable. But I think you ladies should know this isn't the first time something like this has happened up here. What do you mean? Zendaya asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to hear the answer. About 10 years ago, there was a family rented a cabin about 3 miles from here. Similar situation, someone watching them camping in the woods. Family left after their daughter disappeared for 6 hours. Found her wandering the forest in just her underwear. Didn't remember anything. The story sent ice through Zendaya's veins. Was anyone arrested? Never found who did it. But Tucker hesitated, then seemed to make a decision. Look, I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but there have been reports over the years. People going missing for short periods, found in a confused state. Always the same area of the mountains. Marie had heard enough. We're leaving today. That might be wise, Tucker agreed. If you want, I can follow you down to the main road. Make sure you get out okay. Zendaya was already nodding when they heard it, a voice calling from the woods. Distant, but clearly human. I can see you, girls. The words echoed off the mountainsides. Impossible to locate, but unmistakably directed at them. All 3 people in the driveway froze. Get inside, Tucker said quietly. Now, Marie had worked for wealthy families for 20 years, but she'd never seen fear like this in Zendaya's eyes. Because what they heard moving through the woods wasn't just any intruder, it was something that knew exactly who Zendaya was, and why she was worth more than just money. The voice came again, closer this time. Zendaya, I know you're here. Tucker was already on his radio, calling for backup from other locals. This is Jim Tucker at the Coleman property. We need help up here, armed if possible. Inside the mansion, Marie was methodically checking weapons. Zendaya had insisted on keeping hunting rifles in the house, and Marie knew how to use them. Growing up poor in rural Virginia had taught her skills that California mansions couldn't. How does he know my name? Zendaya asked, her voice barely a whisper. Same way he knew about the security system, Marie replied grimly. He's been studying you. This isn't random. Through the windows, they could see movement in the tree line. Not the careful stalking they'd experienced before, but bold, deliberate action. Someone was done hiding. Tucker appeared at the front door. Ladies, we need to get you out of here. My truck can handle the mountain roads better than your Mercedes. What? About our things? Zendaya asked. Leave, Marie said firmly. Nothing in this house is worth your life. But as they prepared to leave, they heard something that stopped them cold. The sound of the front gate, the electronic security gate at the bottom of the driveway opening and closing. Someone had the access code. That's impossible, Zendaya breathed. Only 3 people have that code. You, me, and my attorney. Tucker was checking his rifle. Whoever this is, they've been planning this for a long time. Through the security cameras, they watched a figure emerge from the woods. Even in daylight, he was difficult to see, clearly dressed in camouflage, moving with the fluid grace of someone completely at home in the wilderness. But his intent was unmistakable. He was heading directly for the house. Back door, Marie decided. We go out the back and circle around to Tucker's truck. It was a good plan. But as they reached the rear of the house, they discovered their stalker had anticipated it. The back terrace, where they'd sat peacefully just 2 nights before, was no longer empty. A man stood at the far end, and for the first time, they could see him clearly. He was younger than expected, maybe early 30s, with the lean, weathered look of someone who lived outdoors. His clothes were military surplus, and he moved with trained precision. Most disturbing of all, he was smiling. Hello, Zendaya, he called out conversationally. I've been waiting to meet you. What do you want? She managed to ask, just to talk. You see, I know something about you that nobody else knows. Something from before you were famous. Zendaya felt the blood drain from her face. There were things from her past, from before Marie, before Hollywood, before the billions that she'd thought were buried forever. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. The man's smile widened. Sure you do. Phoenix, Arizona, summer of 2008. You were just a kid then, staying with your aunt while your parents were going through their divorce. Remember what happened to that little boy, Tommy Chen? The name hit Zendaya like a physical blow. She hadn't heard it in over 15 years, had convinced herself it was a childhood nightmare that couldn't possibly be real. But looking at the stranger's knowing eyes, she realized someone knew the truth about the worst day of her young life. Marie saw her employer's reaction and stepped forward protectively. "I don't know who you are, but you need to leave. Now." "Oh, Marie Washington," the man said, his attention shifting to the housekeeper. "Born in Lynchburg, Virginia, lost your husband in Iraq in 2005. Started working for rich families to pay for your daughter's college. She's a nurse now, isn't she? Lives in Richmond with her 2 kids." The threat was implicit but clear. He knew about their families, their histories, their vulnerabilities. This wasn't a random stalker or even a potential kidnapper. This was someone who'd done serious research, someone with a specific agenda. Tucker appeared behind the rifle. "Ready. Mister, I don't know what game you're playing, but you're trespassing. Time to move along." The stranger looked at Tucker with mild interest. "Jim Tucker, retired Army. Lost part of your hearing in Afghanistan, which is why you didn't hear me coming up behind you." Before anyone could react, the man was moving. He covered the distance between them impossibly fast, and suddenly Tucker was on the ground, his rifle skittering across the terrace stones. "Now," the stranger said, his voice still conversational, "we can have our talk without interruptions." Marie was calculating distances, looking for anything she could use as a weapon. The man seemed to read her thoughts. "Don't try it, Marie. I really don't want to hurt you, but I will if necessary. This is about Zendaya, not you. What do you want?" Zendaya asked again, but this time she sounded less like a billionaire and more like the frightened teenager she'd once been. "I want you to remember what really happened that day in Phoenix, and then I want you to pay for what you did." When the power went out in the mansion, Marie realized this wasn't a random attack. Someone had been planning this for months, and the footprints around the house barefoot, human prints, meant their stalker was closer than they ever imagined. The electrical systems died with a deep hum that faded to nothing, leaving them in the gathering dusk with only the emergency lighting. Through the windows, they could see that their stalker had cut the main power lines, just as he'd probably planned from the beginning. "Generator should kick in," Marie said, but minutes passed without the familiar rumble of backup power. He disabled it. Zendaya realized. He's thought of everything. In the dim emergency lighting, their stalker looked even more threatening. He'd zip-tied Tucker's hands and left him conscious but helpless, positioned where they could all see him as a reminder of what resistance would cost. "My name is David Chen," the man said, settling into one of the expensive outdoor chairs as if he owned the place. "Tommy Chen was my little brother." Zendaya's knees almost buckled. She'd spent 15 years trying to forget that name, that face, that terrible day when everything changed. "I've been looking for you for a very long time, Zendaya. Do you know how hard it is to find someone when they change their name, move across the country, and become someone completely different?" "I didn't change my name," she whispered. "No, but you changed everything else." Zendaya Coleman, the Hollywood star, not Z Martinez, the scared kid from Phoenix whose parents couldn't afford to keep her while they fought over who got the house. Marie was listening intently, trying to understand what she was hearing. In all the years she'd known Zendaya, the young woman had never mentioned Arizona, never talked about her life before Los Angeles. "I was 12 years old," Zendaya said. "I was just a kid. So was Tommy. He was 8. David's voice hardened. 8 years old when you decided to play your little game." The memory came flooding back despite Zendaya's efforts to keep it buried. Phoenix in the summer, staying with her aunt who worked double shifts and left the kids to watch themselves. The neighborhood swimming pool where all the children gathered to escape the heat. Tommy Chen, a small, quiet boy who developed a crush on her. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that," she said. "Tell me what was supposed to happen," David commanded. Tucker was making muffled sounds, trying to speak through his gag. Marie looked between Zendaya and David, understanding that she was witnessing something that had been building for decades. "I was showing off," Zendaya admitted, the words coming out in a rush. "There were older kids there, and I wanted them to think I was cool. Tommy kept following me around, and they were making fun of him. calling him my boyfriend. So you decided to embarrass him. I told him if he really liked me, he should prove it. I dared him to swim to the bottom of the deep end and bring back one of those diving rings. Her voice was barely audible now. He couldn't swim very well. Marie felt her heart break for both children, the 12-year-old desperate to fit in, and the 8-year-old desperate to impress her. He went down. David continued when Zendaya couldn't. Went down and didn't come back up. By the time the lifeguard realized what was happening, Tommy had been underwater for almost 4 minutes. I tried to help, Zendaya protested. I screamed. For the lifeguard. I dove down after him. After it was too late. After you'd already killed him. The words hung in the air like a curse. Zendaya was crying now. Tears she'd held back for 15 years finally flowing freely. He didn't die, she said. Tommy didn't die. Oh, David agreed, his voice cold. He didn't die. He suffered massive brain damage from oxygen deprivation. My brother spent 8 years in various institutions before he finally passed away last Christmas. 8 years of seizures, of not recognizing his own family, of needing help to eat and breathe. Marie finally understood the depth of what she was witnessing. This wasn't just about revenge for a childhood accident. This was about a man who'd spent his entire adult life watching his brain-damaged brother suffer. I'm sorry, Zendaya whispered. I've thought about him every day. I've wished I could take it back. Sorry doesn't bring back 8 years of my brother's life. Sorry doesn't erase the medical bills that bankrupted my family. Sorry doesn't give me back my parents, who died in a car accident rushing to visit Tommy at yet another hospital. David stood up, and for the first time, they could see he was carrying zip ties and rope. This had always been the plan, not just to confront Zendaya, but to take her. The beautiful thing about being rich and famous, he continued, is that everyone knows where you are. Every magazine article, every photo shoot, every red carpet appearance. I've been tracking you for 3 years, waiting for the right opportunity. What do you want? Marie asked, finding her voice. Justice. Zendaya ruined my family's life with her selfish game. Now she gets to experience what it feels like to lose everything. You can't blame a 12-year-old for an accident, Marie protested. Can't I? She dared him to do something she knew he couldn't do safely. She created the situation that destroyed David's attention focused back on Zendaya. And then, instead of facing consequences, she got to become a billionaire while my family lost everything. The twisted logic was becoming clear. In David's mind, Zendaya's success was an affront to his brother's suffering. Every dollar she earned, every award she won, every moment of happiness she experienced was stolen from Tommy. I've been planning this for months, he said, producing the zip ties. Studied your security, your routines, your staff. Marie here has been very predictable in her grocery orders. Did you know she has them delivered every Tuesday at exactly 9 a.m.? Marie's blood ran cold as she realized he'd been tracking even her most mundane activities. The delivery driver was very cooperative when I explained that I was a reporter looking for information about Zendaya's private life. Amazing what people will tell you for a few $100s. Every detail of their isolation had been orchestrated. David hadn't just waited for them to come to the mountains, he'd maneuvered them here, cutting off their escape routes and ensuring no one would look for them for days. What's your plan? Zendaya asked, surprising everyone with the steadiness in her voice. My plan is simple. You're going to disappear. No ransom demands, no publicity. You'll just vanish, like Tommy vanished from our lives. Your money won't save you, your fame won't help you, and no one will ever find your body. It was then that they heard the sound that would change everything, a low rumbling from the woods, growing steadily louder. More engines, multiple vehicles, coming up the mountain road. David's carefully planned isolation was about to be shattered. The voice calling from the darkness wasn't asking for ransom. It was calling Zendaya by a name she'd buried years ago. Marie watched her billionaire employer's face go white as she whispered, "He found me." But who was he? And what did he want with Hollywood's youngest billionaire? The sound of approaching vehicles filled David with visible frustration. His careful planning was being disrupted by factors he hadn't controlled. Who else knows you're here? He demanded, grabbing Zendaya roughly. Nobody, she insisted. But, even as she said it, she realized that wasn't entirely true. Her attorney knew about the retreat. Her business manager had her location for emergency contact. Most importantly, her security company monitored the mansion's systems remotely. The power outage would have triggered automatic alerts. Damn it, David muttered, realizing the same thing. He'd been so focused on isolating them physically that he'd forgotten about digital monitoring. The first vehicle to appear was a sheriff's department SUV, followed by what looked like a private security van. David's eyes darted between his captives and the approaching help, calculating odds and options. This complicates things, he said, but it doesn't change them. Before anyone could react, he'd grabbed Zendaya and was dragging her toward the tree line. Marie lunged forward to help, but David's military training showed as he efficiently knocked her unconscious with the butt of a tactical knife. Tucker was struggling against his zipped eyes, making urgent sounds behind his gag as he watched David disappear into the forest with Zendaya. The sheriff's deputies who burst onto the scene found chaos and unconscious Housekeeper, a bound and gagged local resident, and no sign of the property's owner. Within minutes, the mansion was swarming with law enforcement, but their quarry had vanished into 200 acres of dense wilderness. In the forest, David moved with the confidence of someone who'd spent weeks scouting the terrain. He knew every trail, every hiding spot, every vantage point. More importantly, he knew exactly where he was taking Zendaya. "Where are we going?" she asked, trying to keep the panic out of her voice. "Somewhere we won't be interrupted," he replied. "I've been preparing for this possibility." The somewhere turned out to be a natural cave system about half a mile from the mansion. David had discovered it during his reconnaissance and had spent considerable time making it habitable. Solar panels hidden among the rocks powered LED lights, and he'd stockpiled supplies for an extended stay. "Welcome to your new home," he said, pushing her inside. The cave was larger than it appeared from outside, with multiple chambers connected by narrow passages. David had set up what amounted to a primitive apartment sleeping area, food storage, even a makeshift bathroom facility. It was clear he'd been planning this for much longer than months. "You've been thinking about this for years," Zendaya realized, "since the day Tommy died. 8 years of watching him suffer, 8 years of planning what I'd do to the person responsible." Outside, they could hear the sounds of a search beginning, voices, vehicle engines, and what sounded like helicopters in the distance. David seemed unconcerned. "They'll never find this place," he said confidently. "I've had plenty of time to test their search capabilities. Your security company is thorough, but they're looking for conventional hiding spots." He was right about the cave being well hidden. The entrance was concealed behind a fall of rocks that looked completely natural, and the internal chambers were deep enough to muffle sound. David had chosen his fortress carefully. "What happens now?" Zendaya asked. "Now we wait. Let them exhaust themselves looking for you in all the obvious places. In a few days, when they've given up hope, we'll begin your real punishment." "Which is?" David's smile was cold. "You get to experience what Tommy did. Confusion, fear, helplessness. The gradual realization that no one is coming to save you." It was then that Zendaya understood the true horror of her situation. David wasn't planning to kill her quickly. He intended to keep her alive, to make her suffer the way his brother had suffered, for as long as possible. The sound of search dogs reached them faintly through the rock walls. David listened for a moment, then nodded with satisfaction. "They're starting at the mansion and working outward. Standard search pattern. By the time they reach this area, I'll have moved you deeper into the cave system. There are passages back here that connect to other mountains entirely. People will look for me," Zendaya said, grasping for hope. "Of course, they will. The FBI, private investigators, international search teams, all the resources money can buy." He paused. "Just like my family used all their resources trying to help Tommy. But some things can't be fixed with money, can they?" The parallel was deliberate and cruel. Just as the Chen family had exhausted their finances trying to help their brain-damaged son, David intended to make Zendaya's billions worthless in saving her. "I never meant for it to happen," she said again. It doesn't matter. Results matter. Tommy's results were brain damage and death. Your results were fame and fortune. That's not justice. Outside, the search was intensifying. Marie had regained consciousness and was providing detailed descriptions of David and his capabilities. Tucker was explaining the terrain and suggesting search patterns. The sheriff's department had called in state resources, and the FBI was en route, but David had prepared for all of this. The cave system extended for miles underground, with multiple entrances and exits. He'd cached supplies throughout the network and had escape routes planned to 3 different states. The beautiful thing about caves, he told Zendaya, is that they're natural prisons. No bars, no walls that can be broken down, just solid rock and darkness. As if to emphasize his point, he switched off the LED lights, plunging them into absolute blackness. This is what Tommy saw for the last 8 years of his life. David's voice came from the darkness. Nothing, just darkness and confusion and fear. Zendaya tried to control her breathing, tried not to let the panic overwhelm her. Somewhere above them, Marie was probably coordinating the search effort, bringing all her protective instincts to bear. But even Marie's decades of experience couldn't help her find a cave system that had been hidden for millennia. Back at the mansion, Marie was indeed coordinating the search with military precision. Her unconsciousness had been brief, and she'd awakened with complete clarity about what needed to be done. He's ex-military, she told FBI Special Agent Sarah Chen, who'd arrived within 3 hours of the alert. The irony of the agent's surname wasn't lost on anyone. Moves like Special Forces, knows the terrain, and has been planning this for months. Agent Chen nodded grimly. We've identified him as David Chen, former Army Rangers, discharged 8 years ago after psychological evaluation deemed him unfit for service. He's been off the grid since then. His brother, Marie said. He mentioned his brother Tommy. Tommy Chen died last Christmas after 8 years in care facilities. Severe brain damage from a drowning incident when he was 8 years old. Chen paused. The incident occurred in Phoenix in 2008. Zendaya would have been 12 at the time. The pieces were falling into place, but they didn't make the search any easier. David had military training, local knowledge, and a 15-year head start on planning his revenge. Tucker, now freed and tending to a minor head wound, was providing crucial terrain information. He's not moving randomly, the local man insisted. I've seen him around here for weeks, always in the same general area. There's something specific he's heading for, caves. One of the deputies suggested. These mountains are full of limestone. Caves. Not just any caves, Tucker corrected. There's a system about half a mile northeast that connects to the next mountain over. My grandfather used to tell stories about moonshiners hiding in there during Prohibition. Agent Chen was already organizing cave search teams when Marie interrupted. Wait, he wants to be found. Everyone looked at her. What do you mean? Chen asked. This man has been planning for 15 years. He's thought of everything, the security systems, the power grid, the search patterns. But he left obvious footprints around the house. He called out to us where we could hear him clearly. He wants us to know he has her. You think this is all theater? I think David Chen doesn't just want Zendaya to suffer. He wants everyone to know she's suffering. The same way his family's suffering was public medical bills, charity fundraisers, local news stories about the brain-damaged boy. Marie's insight was proving accurate. As the search teams deployed, they found signs that seemed almost deliberately placed, broken branches pointing toward the cave system. A piece of Zendaya's distinctive jewelry dropped where searchers would find it. He's leading us where he wants us to go, Agent Chen realized. Marie had always protected Zendaya's secrets, but when the naked man emerged from the woods screaming, "And see you, girls," she realized some secrets were worth dying for, because what was hunting them in the Blue Ridge Mountains wasn't human anymore. In the caves, David had moved Zendaya deeper into the system, just as he'd promised. The chambers here were older, more primitive, with formations that had taken thousands of years to create. Water dripped constantly from the ceiling, and the air carried the musty smell of deep earth. Your search teams are getting close, he told her, lighting a battery-powered lantern. I can hear their radios echoing through the rock. Zendaya's hands were now zip-tied, and David had attached her to a heavy stalagmite with climbing rope. She could move within a small area, but couldn't escape. The psychological effect was as intended. She felt trapped, helpless, much as his brother must have felt. They'll find me, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Eventually, yes. But not before you understand what real suffering feels like. David settled into what was obviously a prepared position, complete with camping chair and supplies. Do you know what the worst part was for Tommy? Zendaya didn't answer. It wasn't the seizures or the feeding tubes or the medications. It was the moments of clarity. Sometimes, maybe once a month, he'd wake up and be almost normal for a few minutes. He'd recognize us, ask where he was, wonder why he couldn't move properly. David's voice carried the pain of someone who'd lived this nightmare repeatedly. Those moments were the cruelest because they reminded us and him of what we'd lost. What you took from us. I was 12 years old, Zendaya repeated. Old enough to know the difference between right and wrong. Old enough to understand that daring someone to do something dangerous might hurt them. The argument was circular, but David's obsession didn't require logic. 15 years of grief and rage had crystallized into a need for proportional suffering. Above them, the search was intensifying. Marie had convinced Agent Chen to let her join the cave teams, arguing that she knew Zendaya better than anyone and might spot clues others would miss. She's claustrophobic, Marie told the lead search team. Has been since she was a child. Being underground will terrify her more than almost anything. The information was useful for understanding Zendaya's psychological state, but it also confirmed David's choice of prison. He'd researched his victim thoroughly, selecting a form of confinement that would maximize her distress. Movement ahead, one of the searchers reported over radio. Looks like fresh footprints. But when they reached the indicated area, they found only more misdirection. Old footprints, obviously placed to lead them deeper into the cave system's less accessible areas. He's playing with us, Agent Chen realized. Every sign we find is deliberate. Marie studied the cave map Tucker had provided. The system was extensive, with passages that hadn't been fully explored since the 1960s. Some led to dead ends, others to underground rivers, and still others to exits miles from the mansion. If he knows we're tracking his signs, she said slowly, then he's controlling where we search, which means we need to go where he doesn't want us to go. As Marie dragged the unconscious Zendaya toward the car, she could hear him getting closer. 20 years of loyalty had led to this moment. But would her devotion to the young billionaire be enough to get them both out alive? But that rescue scenario was still hours away. In the depths of the cave, David was implementing the next phase of his plan. Time for your first lesson, he told Zendaya, producing a device that looked like a modified dog training collar. What is that? Shock collar, modified for humans. It delivers the same kind of electrical stimulation they used on Tommy during his therapy sessions. Amazing how something designed to help can become a tool for punishment. Zendaya recoiled as David approached with the collar, but her restraints made resistance futile. The device locked around her neck with a soft click. Every time Tommy had a seizure, his brain was essentially being electrocuted from the inside. This will give you a small taste of what that felt like. The first shock was mild, more startling than painful, but David gradually increased the intensity, watching Zendaya's reactions with clinical detachment. The beautiful thing about electrical stimulation, he explained, is that it affects both the body and the mind. Physical pain, but also psychological confusion and fear. Above ground, Marie had convinced the search teams to split their efforts. While the main groups followed David's obvious trail, smaller teams were exploring the areas he seemed to be avoiding. Here, she pointed to a section of Tucker's map. This passage isn't on any of his breadcrumb trails. If he's trying to keep us away from somewhere, this might be it. Agent Chen studied the indicated area. It's deep underground, connects to the main system, but the entrance is hidden behind a rockfall. How did you spot it? Because it's exactly where I'd hide if I wanted to be found eventually, but not quickly. Marie's reasoning was sound. David's psychology required an audience for Zendaya's suffering, but he needed time to implement his revenge first. The team that entered the hidden passage moved slowly, aware that David might have prepared defenses. What they found instead were signs of recent habitation camping gear, food supplies, and evidence of long-term planning. Command, this is Team 3. We've found his base camp, but it's empty. Looks like he moved deeper. In the deeper chambers, David was explaining his timeline to Zendaya. The shock collar is just the beginning. Tomorrow, we start the sensory deprivation, then the sleep disruption. Day by day, I'm going to break down your mind the same way the lack of oxygen broke down Tommy's. The search teams will find me, Zendaya insisted, though her voice was weaker now. Maybe, but not before you understand what my family went through. Not before you experience real helplessness. The psychological torture was methodical, designed to recreate the confusion and fear that had characterized his brother's condition. David had spent years researching brain injury symptoms and developing ways to simulate them in a healthy person, but his obsession with recreating his brother's experience was also his weakness. The elaborate revenge scenario required him to stay close to Zendaya, to monitor her psychological deterioration personally, which meant he couldn't retreat to his deeper escape routes. Marie's team was closing in, following not the obvious signs David had left, but the subtle traces of someone trying not to be tracked. Disturbed dust, minute scratches on rock walls, the almost imperceptible wearing of stone from repeated passage. He's close, Marie whispered into her radio. I can smell the camping fuel he's been using for his lanterns. Agent Chen's voice crackled back. Proceed with extreme caution. He's shown he's willing to use violence. But Marie had already made her decision. 20 years of protecting Zendaya had led to this moment, and she wasn't going to let military training or psychological obsession keep her from her, girl. The final chamber revealed itself around a bend in the passage. Battery-powered lights illuminated a scene that was both primitive and sophisticated, a carefully prepared prison designed for maximum psychological impact. David Chen stood over his captive, shock collar remote in his hand, completely focused on his victim's suffering. He never heard Marie approaching until her tackle sent them both crashing into the chamber wall. The fight that followed was brief but vicious. David had military training, but Marie had maternal rage and 20 years of accumulated protective instinct. When Agent Chen and the tactical team arrived 30 seconds later, they found David unconscious and Marie cutting Zendaya free from her restraints. It's over, babe, Marie whispered, gathering the trembling billionaire into her arms. It's over now. 3 months later, Zendaya sat in her Malibu mansion sunroom, watching Marie tend to the garden through floor-to-ceiling windows. The older woman had refused any increase in her already generous salary, insisting that protecting Zendaya was just part of the job. David Chen had been convicted on multiple federal charges and sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. The trial had revealed the full extent of his 15-year obsession, including detailed plans for psychological torture that had disturbed even experienced prosecutors. But the legal resolution hadn't erased the psychological impact. Zendaya still woke some nights in cold sweats, dreaming of caves and darkness. She'd started seeing a therapist who specialized in trauma recovery, and slowly, she was beginning to heal. The incident had also forced her to confront the truth about Tommy Chen's accident. Working with victim advocacy groups, she'd established a foundation for families dealing with traumatic brain injuries, funding research and support services that might have helped the Chen family decades earlier. It won't bring Tommy back, she told Marie one evening, and it won't undo what David became because of his pain, but maybe it can prevent other families from going through what they did. Marie had simply nodded, understanding that her employer was trying to find meaning in a senseless tragedy. The Blue Ridge mansion had been sold, the proceeds donated to brain injury research. Neither woman ever wanted to see those mountains again, but they'd learned something valuable in those caves, that their bond went far deeper than employee and employer. They were family, chosen family, and nothing would ever break that connection. On quiet evenings, when the California sun painted the Pacific in shades of gold and pink, Zendaya sometimes thought about the scared 12-year-old who dared a little boy to prove his love by doing something dangerous. That child's thoughtless moment had rippled through decades, destroying one family and nearly destroying another, but it had also revealed the depth of human loyalty and love. Marie's willingness to risk everything for someone she'd helped raise. The search teams who'd worked tirelessly to find a missing person they'd never met. Even Agent Chen, who'd put aside personal feelings to pursue justice professionally. Sometimes, Zendaya reflected, the worst moments reveal the best in people, and sometimes, that's enough to make the healing possible. "Dinner's ready, Miss Z," Marie called from the doorway, using the nickname she'd never stopped using despite Zendaya's billions. "Coming, Marie," Zendaya replied, closing her laptop and leaving the past where it belonged. In the present, there was work to do, lives to help, and a future to build on the foundation of lessons learned in the darkest places. The caves were behind them now, but the light they'd found there, the light of human connection and redemption, would guide them forward. Don't forget to leave a comment below to tell us which famous character's horror story you'd like to see featured next. Don't forget to subscribe and like.